Hey, Dan here from Greasy Boy Customs. Today we're going to be continuing on the Fairlane by going through the brakes. Now, let me show you what we got. Only this right front is actually working, and you see it's spinning pretty free. It needs some adjustment there. However, if we come over to the driver's side, you'll notice that this doesn't spin so easy. We're actually driving this car in and barely touch the brakes. It wants to dart over to the right side. So we're going to be taking care of the hoses, the shoes, inspecting the drums and hardware, replacing the wheel cylinders, and I believe we're also going to upgrade to a dual bowl master cylinder, and I'll explain that quickly. The master cylinder has one bowl. If one line breaks, you lose all your brake fluid. If you have a dual bowl, your front and rear are separated. So if your rear line or your front line breaks, you still have some kind of brakes. It's just a safety precaution. It's not a necessity. I've driven plenty of vehicles with single bowl master cylinders, and only once have I come into a sketchy situation. So let's get started, get these wheels off. A cool little trick to getting your inner seal out, because we want to repack these bearings and inspect them anyway. So once you got your outer bearing off, put your nut back on, just a couple threads, and then once you get your drum loose, maybe. There we go. Use that existing nut to help grab the seal and pop it off. And there we go. Wow, these drums look like crap. Check our wheel cylinders. Yep. See that fluid drip out of there? Or that dry, crusty shit? That means your wheel cylinder's been leaking. All that rust in there. So good thing we're replacing those. These lines look like absolute hell too. So we'll get those replaced also. All right, we're gonna show you a couple things. First of all, these wheel cylinders, they mount using this one nut right here, as opposed to having two mounting bolts like you're used to. As you can see, they were nice and crusty and roached out and had been leaking. And the shoes were in decent shape, but the material started to crack and come apart. So we got new shoes in there. The hardware was in great shape. Actually, it wasn't replaced too long ago. The adjuster's nice and smooth. We got our drums turned. We got the bearings repacked, everything ready to go back together. Now, we also put a new brake hose on here. You'll notice something a little strange about this, though. This block here, the line comes in and then sends fluid over to the passenger side. There are copper washers in here, like a banjo bolt, to work on that T-block, and the line screws in also with a copper washer. So we're going to go ahead and get our drum mounted up and get our seal in there and get this back together. Do the other side. Moving on to the back brakes, you can see we have one big problem. See this oil right here? It's not supposed to be there. Now, the wheel cylinder is definitely leaking. We can peel it back again and see it's wet in there. But we need to determine, is it the axle seal leaking or the brake fluid leaking? The best way to do this, get some on your finger, smell it, don't taste it. This big nose comes in handy sometimes. That is definitely gear oil. You can tell because it smells like shit. Okay, I guess we're doing seals. This is the rear brake line and brake hose, and as you can see, it's just flopping around. And it's even starting to kink over there. And there's a compression fitting on here. While compression fittings do work to get you out of a bind, we're gonna remove this and actually put a flared fitting on here. So we'll be doing shoes, wheel cylinders, the rear hose, the rear line, and then we'll be servicing the rear end and repairing this oil leak. So we're getting our shoes torn off of here. You can see everything's nice and oil soaked, but that's okay. We're gonna put all new stuff on there and clean up this backing plate, all that jazz. There we go. A couple taps is all she needed. Now, some things you want to check on here. This is your bearing. That's your bearing retainer. But when you get it torn apart, we want to make sure that there's no damage to the shaft anywhere. Like, there's a seal in here, and see this sealing surface? It's not exactly the best. So we may be putting a repair sleeve on here. Let's go ahead and get this out. We'll leave the park and brake cable on there, that's fine. All right, we'll just swing this out of the way. And voila, we can get to it way easier. Don't lose these bolts. They're very important. Now we already got the other side back together, axle seal replaced, all the issues handled there. We're gonna go ahead and tear this side down, and we're gonna go ahead and just replace the axle seal because we're already in here. If that one was leaking, there's a good chance this one is about to do the same or already has. We can find out here in just a second. If I can get this stupid thing off. There we go. As you can see, they're pretty gross. These wheel cylinders were not changed that long ago. You see this one actually has fluid dripping out of it. But sitting is never good for classic cars. Drive them. It's worth it. Use the access panel. Little hole there to get to the bolt. Little tap. Now one thing you'll notice when we took out the other side and this side, almost no fluid is coming out, which is a very bad sign. I'm looking inside the axle tube and it's bone dry in here. You should have some oil in there because that's what reaches the bearings. I think this bearing is toast. This is just all the crud we scraped off the back of the backing plate. And again, dry in there. Let's go ahead and rip this seal out. Well, and there we go. We've got our brake drums machined. The new shoes and wheel cylinders are all in place. The axle bearing we had to replace on this side. New axle seals on both sides. And we've got the fluid drained out of the rear end. So we're going to refill the rear end. We're going to replace the brake hose and the brake line all the way to the front because it changes sizes like 4 times and has compression fittings everywhere. Not the best. Now this is our master cylinder and proportioning valve setup we have purchased. This is a dual bowl master cylinder. In most cases, you'll find that the smaller bowl is for your rear brakes and the larger bowl is for your front brakes. It's already pre-bent lines that come with it, and they go into this proportioning valve that is adjusted. This adjusts the pressure to the rear. It also comes with a brake switch and connectors, which is great. Now we've just got to mount it here. So the issue is this master cylinder, as you might be able to see, is held in with 4 bolts. We got to take these 4 bolts out, and then we got to figure out how to make it a 2-bolt mount, which it looks like there's some hardware in the way right there where we need it to be. So let's get that popped off. Well, it looks like we lucked out. These 2 bottom holes are centered in this hole, and I don't even think I have to re-drill the holes. It looks like the bolts all line up perfect. So when you get this bolted up, don't forget, you're probably gonna have to reuse this. Now we don't know if we need to change the length of this until we get it installed, and we'll see where it is on the brake pedal, but don't throw that out off the old one. Bolted up beautifully. Look how nice it looks. Looks great. And the push rod was already the right length. Now we do have to run our brake lines to the front and the rear off the proportioning valve. It is labeled front. There's 2 different fronts. Doesn't matter which side it goes to. And then there's a rear. You can see on there it's labeled R. Hook it in there and run our lines. And then the only other thing that I'm concerned about is how close it is to the exhaust manifold and it heating up this proportioning valve. So I'm actually going to make a heat shield that'll come down and block some of that heat. But we'll do that later. Let's get our lines bent and run. So what's left on the 57 Ford? Not much is the answer. We are very close. Very, very, very close to the end. In the next video, we're going to be finishing up this round of work on the 57. We are going to do intake gaskets and adjust the valves and replace the carburetor. And then we're going to just double check all of our fluids. We're going to test drive it. We're going to make sure everything is happy and working well so we can return it to the customer until the next round of work. Unfortunately, it's already gotten cold outside and we missed our window of opportunity to enjoy the car in the warm weather. However, it is North Carolina and sometimes we have crazy weather. Sometimes it's 70 degrees on New Year's. Sometimes we get snow. Not very often, but it happens. So we'll hope for some fun weather for them to enjoy. But until next time, happy hot rodding.